Welcome everyone to Managing Madness with Adrian.
And Carolyn.
Hmm.
That was very
So,
sing-songy, but here I am.
here we go. What happens when we film in the evening? We're really testing out different things. This is actually an interesting episode because this is the first episode we're recording after releasing our first two episodes. Um,
Yay!
yes, so one of the big topics that came up, especially on release, was my neurodivergence and anxiety and everything that came with that. So today, kind of, we'll be going a little bit into that, kind of our experiences with both teaching, parenting, being an adult in this space. I'll start off with, well, as I mentioned in one of, I believe, the first episode, my main three are ADHD. I've been officially diagnosed with ADHD with very high inattentiveness, relatively mild impulsivity, and
Impulsivity.
hyperactivity. But the inattentiveness was really high.
Mm-hmm.
General anxiety and severe clinical depression, which is more so like an episode of my life, but it's still the main thing that I focus my life around in the sense that it's the one thing I never want to return to. I consider my
Yeah.
depression era between 12 and 27, and I consider myself depression out of depression past that age now that I'm 41. But still, it is the number one thing I take care of myself for because
Mm-hmm.
I never want to return back into depression. It's the one thing that
Yeah.
scares me.
Yeah.
So that's
It's a pretty
something I'm
dark
sure that
place.
will come up. Mhm. And one of the interesting things, I guess I can start, uh, as we mentioned in one of the past videos, I didn't get diagnosed until um,
We
we
were
were
working
teaching.
together.
Yes, so we were working together. We were both special education teachers, and it was within teaching special education that I really saw a lot of myself. Um,
Like, wait a second.
yeah, and I specifically remember one instance with one student. I won't say their name, but I was standing next to them in class, and it was a math class, and I
I
remember
know
myself kind of
exactly
starting
who this
to,
is.
yeah. Do you remember this one? I started daydreaming a bit, and next thing I know, I hear the sound of a water bottle hitting the board, and I turn around to my student who is extremely apologetic, super sorry, like I don't know why I did that, and I'm like, okay, but remember I was daydreaming, so this all kind of woke me up from that. So we actually went outside and had a conversation, and again, very apologetic, but I approached the situation where I was like, okay, like I'm an adult, so I went into daydreaming. I didn't throw anything, but clearly something else was happening in this situation that like you didn't
That you
the
were trying to remove yourself from it, or like this
right
had
or
become your coping.
something you needed some sort of stimulation. So it was like that conversation that I had with the student where they were just like, I don't know, like I felt like really bored and I just needed to do something and the water bottle was in front of me and I threw it and I didn't really notice how close the teacher was.
Yeah.
Uh but when the student's telling me this, it just makes so much sense to me because I was daydreaming, except I'm a teacher in the room and no, I'm not supposed to throw objects, especially towards
Ah.
other adults. And that's when I went to get my uh, ADHD diagnosis. And I specifically remember, I wish I remembered the name of the test, but I want to share this experience because if anybody else has ever had to do it, they put me in a room for about 45 minutes. It was a dark room with a little square in the middle. It was a computer with just a little square. And I was
Okay.
supposed to click every time I believe a dot appeared above the
So
square.
it's almost like an eye test, like but it's like that's like a 30-second eye test.
Yeah. No, this was 45, like I believe it was like 45 minutes and
Okay.
it was like judging my like response time and like I was only supposed to click whether like the image was on the like circle was on top of the square or something
Okay.
below. I came out of the room so angry at the psychiatrist because all I could also see was the one square that was always present, so that was like locked into my sight. But it was just such a frustrating experience to me. Like I really wanted to fight my psychiatrist, and I couldn't talk to them um, until like I calmed myself down. But that was like
Hmm.
one of the experiences with like ADHD where I started seeing different things, and sure enough, they're like, "Yep, you're very inattentive, and you do have some impulse issues." But I went through my academic career being more so identified as a waste of potential, a jokester. I don't take life seriously, apparently. And a key,
Apparently. So I've been
apparently,
told.
because the big thing was that was I was super depressed and just trying to
Hmm.
stay alive. So to me,
Yeah.
I was taking it super seriously because I was trying to actually stay alive. And
Yeah.
hearing that as a kid, I remember how that ultimately ended up impacting me.
Yeah, that's
Um,
interesting. That made me think of two things. With my oldest is diagnosed with ADHD and ODD, so oppositional defiance disorder, which presents in different ways.
yeah,
Yeah, and
I,
you've probably
I
got a little bit of
so
that too.
I don't have
But
that
I mean,
official diagnosis we've discussed, but yes, that's also on the table of potential.
yeah, and there are some there's some controversy surrounding that. Even I can't remember in the DSM-5 if it's like technically a thing or not, or
Or
like a lot of
a
it is a
symptom of
trauma
ADHD.
response. Yeah,
But
like a
I think
lot
it
of it's a
gets
trauma
connected.
response.
Yeah,
Hmm.
but also
And
connected to
comorbid,
ADHD. Yeah,
right? Um, but even just recently, because he's struggled in school his whole life. I mean, it's been a battle. And he's super intelligent. Like his ability to hold a conversation, to engage with people, to remember like seemingly meaningless things is like top notch. But like work ethic and engagement and work completion are like virtually non-existent and have been since he was in preschool, and he's a junior this year. But we took him to go get some brain testing at the beginning of the year, and it was interesting because the lady who had administered the assessments when we were doing the consult afterwards, she was like, "When I saw your test scores, this is not the person I expected." And because he was so low in some of his things. But then
mm,
when you're talking to him, he presents like a relatively typical 17-year-old male,
right.
but she was like, I would argue that you're actually trying harder than your peers just to do what you're doing. And that was just kind of eye opening to me as a parent of like, what if I don't know. And then it's so hard because like long term, I still want him to be like a functional, what's the word? Like where you give things to society. What's the like
Citizen.
productive, like
Pr-
positive
mhm.
person in society, like happy and healthy and honorable. But yeah, I don't know what that looks like right now for him, and he doesn't
But
either. I mean, it's causing a lot of panic for him of like, ugh. So
I mean, here we are, this show talking about me, still figuring it
yeah,
out. So, um,
you've been okay. Okay, this gives me
we're doing
hope.
because because the big thing of what I was gonna mention, one of the key things that stuck out when you were talking about it that I did mention that stuck out to me really was that work ethic, because
Hmm.
that's so hard to tell with individuals like myself, just speaking for myself, because I was labeled lazy, but I was
Hmm.
severely depressed. So all of my energy was just getting to
Yeah,
showing up
surviving.
and
Yeah.
being present, trying to sit down, which is extremely difficult for me to do.
Hmm.
All of
Hmm.
my energy and work was being put into that nothing was left to show in as far as like general performance. What I always fortunately did was I always performed well. um, I'm a quick learner, so I would
Yeah, yeah,
just study right before a test, cram everything in, and I could
yeah.
generally
I mean,
produce
he
well.
does really well on like standardized tests. I mean, even when he was in elementary school, he was still like in the talent pool for gifted and talented. And I would argue that he probably is, you know, because growing up, I was labeled gifted and talented, but I kind of joke that I was just a type A performer. Like, I don't know as I
Mm,
really think that far out of the box on things. Like, he's kind of like encompasses some of the negative parts of giftedness of like, the pushing the limits, like questioning authority, like super defiant, the things that are just so frustrating for teachers most of the time,
mm,
that don't get it. Um, Anyways, yeah, where I and yeah, that was the second thing I
mm,
was going to mention earlier. where I am very much like set up to succeed in our American education system, you know, where
Mhm.
I'm a rule follower. I can like mostly read a room, right? I like being funny, but I also can kind of like know when I need to tone it down a little bit. Um, but yeah, I performed well on tests. I was always in the high groups or the gifted groups because I performed, but not necessarily like I don't know, not
Yeah.
like gifted because I feel like giftedness is more like outside the box thinking. I don't know. I'm just kind of
I
rambling
mean, a
here.
lot of the ways we in the American school system, though, define gifted is very much based on performance in the academic structure, like
Hmm.
in our own academic system.
Right. And like, are
Um,
you a good student? Do you
yeah,
like put forth effort? Are you hardworking? Like these like super like tangible things that probably
and
isn't truly.
and one of the big ones, as we discussed, like so, I don't have it because that's why I don't also know if it's an official diagnosis or a symptom of other diagnoses, but like I also do been oppositional defiance is also within my realm. I've also have OCD tendencies.
Hmm.
Um, I actually have a hat that says DSM defined because a lot of my behaviors seem to be found just in the DSM. Um, but one of the things that changed my life and the perception, and this is where I'm much more now in my life where I'm at with a lot of that stuff is a someone I was dating once gave me a book called A First Rate Madness. And it was
Say
the
it
link
again. What's the name of it?
A First Rate Madness,
Okay.
the link between mental illness and leadership.
Oh.
And um, the big theory or concept behind it was that during uh, times of peace and calm, the average individual is typically best suited to lead or is well fit in roles of leadership because if it's a time of peace, typically all you're trying to do is keep what's already happening
Right.
in place. So you're
Yeah.
just following, there's a system, follow, keep the boat. If you're talking about being in the ocean of a boat, you're sailing
Hmm.
calm seas. All you got to
Okay.
do is keep the ship straight.
Okay.
However, when we hit times of crises, the the average individual is not often best suited for those types of leadership because there's not often a path to follow.
Okay.
So
So you're
that's
having to
when
like.
you need different thinkers. So a lot of who he studied was Gandhi, Martin Luther King. I know I asked about like Che, Winston Churchill,
Mhm.
Ted Turner, Lincoln, and
Interesting. Okay.
what a lot of the theory was based off of too was that depression and um, bipolar disorder,
Hmm.
and I forget how the names have changed now too, but people who suffer depression have high levels of empathy
Hmm.
than average, higher levels of empathy, creativity, resilience,
Something else.
and one
Well,
more
and that.
thing.
Yeah. Okay.
And
Which would
I'll
make
try to.
sense. Like if you're feeling all the feels and like experiencing the feels of like all the people around you, like how exhausting.
Right. And that's a lot of what, looking back historically, a lot of those leaders had major
Hmm.
periods of their life with severe depression. A lot of that goes into the idea that when things are so different and the world needs to build a different path, we need the people who have been building different paths their entire life. Like that's
Yeah.
why, like, if we're going back to the ship analogy and the captain of a ship, if all you know is stormy waters, when
Hmm.
everybody's boats start to hit stormy waters, you're probably
And
going to
we
be
like panic, right? Of
right.
like, no, 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 like this is uncomfortable. I'm gonna capsize.
It feels
You're like,
super
this is how I
comfortable to
live
me.
my life.
Right. It feels super comfortable to me. which is kind of
Yeah.
going even to where we discussed before, where I thrive in chaos. Happiness is uncomfortable for me because
Hmm.
so little of my life has ever been dedicated to that concept.
Yeah.
So much has been dedicated to surviving. So when we hit these different points, so that really transitioned to now how I'm starting to understand a lot of my life is a lot of those discomforts that society has with me as far as my movement. We'll just
Hmm.
start at that. I am supposed
Yeah.
to sit down as an adult.
Yeah, and you know what? But then it's such this like contradictory thing, right? Especially being like a parent and an educator, and like I'm aware of these things, but like pacing stresses me out. Like it feels uncomfortable to me to like, but like I'm currently walking through a divorce, but I was married to somebody who needed to pace, and my oldest is a pacer, and in my head, I'm like, this I, yeah, but like, what do you give to be comfortable? Like, if he can't even process without pacing, but then like increases my anxiety. I don't know. It's such this mix of like
Well,
give and take.
but that's where we you have to identify what is ultimately because for me pacing is everything. I
Yeah,
will always need to pace. That is
yeah,
my way of soothing myself.
right. Yeah,
When
and
I'm
I
on
think that is definitely for those two as well. Like, it's just a calming, like, help me focus. And I mean, I know you've done a lot of work in um, like trauma informed care. I
mhm,
don't know if we're allowed to speak to what exactly it is, but like
yeah,
just being able to like ground yourself. So for me, like pacing is not grounding.
mhm, right.
It's like like why are we, but anyways.
But that's where to me and we can kind of my one of my big revelations was in 2020. I took a training called the Community Resiliency Model, and it is from the Trauma Resource Institute. So this isn't sponsored or anything. This is, but in all full disclosure, I do train with them. So if you ever do take a training with them, I may be one of your trainers. It is
Yay.
also something I share with the community. But one of the big things was when I took the training, we went into a part which was grounding.
Hmm.
And in a later episode, I'll discuss more about this model. But one of the things was grounding, and I had always been presented with grounding in a stationary position. The
Yeah.
example I can always think of is the yoga apps I would use. So with my anxiety, there's no way I'm ever going to a studio. So I would do my yoga at home off my
Hmm.
tablet, and every yoga app I had at the end of it gave me like about 10 minutes to just lay on the mat or sit and just let my muscles relax and whatever. I never lasted longer than 2 minutes any
Hmm.
of those times. And I would get up in complete frustration. All the relaxation that I had received from the exercise of the yoga
Was now gone.
gone. hmm I was pissed at that point
Yeah.
because at that point too, so much judgment would then start to follow me. Like, why can't you do this? Like, this is actually like
Yeah.
ancient wisdom of touching,
Huh.
connecting with your body, and I can't do it. So all the judgment and all that would come into play.
Huh.
In this training, when I was asked, okay, so they asked us to get comfortable, I raised my hand and I said, I'm not comfortable sitting down. So the trainer, who is also the co-creator of the model, Elaine Caras, I'll give her a shout out. She
Woo.
said, well, do something that makes you comfortable. So I
So you just
said,
started doing
okay,
cartwheels?
yeah, no, if I could. So I got up and I started to pace, and she just had me focus on each of my steps, and it
Hmm.
was the most relaxing experience I could have in a like work setting. And I was
Yeah.
allowed to just do that to the point where I never sat down for the rest of the training. Really, I was always pacing him back. But what also really came into play with all of that was I would usually pace when I was already super frustrated, and there was like no other choice. It was either pace or I was going to punch a wall because that's something I
Right.
have also done in my past.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, I'd use it to that last second because I had so much judgment on myself
Okay.
for it. So after I was given that permission, so many times of my teachers telling me to sit down, my mom telling me, sit down,
Hmm.
shut up. You'll stop getting into so much trouble if you just sit down and shut up. And me never being
You
able to
also
do
won't
that.
make a lot of changes.
Right? I also remember a partner that I couldn't really remember fully, but I remember them once telling me your pacing isn't cute anymore. And me really tripping out because I
Huh.
never knew it was cute. And that's what I
Yeah,
even said.
you're
Like,
like, I
when
wasn't
was it
doing this
cute?
because it was cute.
Yeah.
I was trying
I
to be
was
calm.
right. But it was like at least you could have given me a heads up. I could have like worked it when I knew it was cute. But like
Yeah, right?
now I'm finding out when it's like annoying. Like,
Yeah,
and I
I
remember
know.
all the
Well, and
judgment.
even in listening to this, I'm like, okay, so if we are needing to make, like, just consider other people and like make accommodations or modifications, like when my oldest does need to like process and pace, like, would it be an appropriate conversation of like, hey, I it does feel stressful to me to watch you pace, but I would love to engage in this conversation. What if I like close my eyes? Like, so
Well,
he's still pacing and maybe, but I don't know. So,
that was
like,
good.
what's something that I could do? Because obviously his need to
Right.
pace is probably stronger than my response to the pacing, right?
Well, my question was, why do you need to watch and pace?
Yeah.
So you suggested closing your eyes, but what calms you? What do you like to do? What is soothing for
I
you?
mean, I like to nap. So,
Okay. So, but okay, that's even harder to have a conversation than his pacing.
exactly.
So,
So that's what I'm
okay,
saying. Like, if we're in a
at least he's staying awake.
conversation, yeah. Like, do I turn my back? Yeah. So, I mean,
Would
and
would would
obviously
that
this is one,
would that be more soothing for you?
right. I feel like the closing my eyes might be, but this is one of those things
Okay.
where it's going to be different for different people. Like, is me closing my eyes going to make my son feel like I'm totally disengaging,
But
or yeah? I mean, I don't know.
that's where communication, I feel, really
Yeah, yeah,
comes into the place.
yeah,
So one of the more liberating things about me knowing that I move, and what I say is, movers got to move, and I'm
yeah.
a mover. Like my body just has to
Napper's got
move.
a nap,
Yeah,
Acosta. Napper's got a nap.
and I'm total in support of naps.
Yeah.
When I heard NASA naps, I was like, yeah, now no one's ever gonna give me an excuse as to why I shouldn't nap if NASA naps. um, but that idea of communicating where if that's what he needs to soothe himself, that being
hmm
able to be so one of the alleviating things for me has been being able to communicate that to people. Hey,
Yeah,
I pace. I hope that doesn't make you nervous. Let me know. If it does, I'll try to walk behind you or something like that. We can figure
yeah.
something out. Even
Well,
like
because
me
like
shaking
even
my leg.
yeah,
People used to really freak out about that and like even put their hands on me, which would freak me out even more. But
yeah,
just telling them, "Hey, I shake my leg," has allowed people to not be so freaked out by it.
yeah. Or
Um,
it allow like it gives them the freedom to then like move to a position where they're not going to get shaken by you or
mhm.
whatever. But I even think like within a classroom, like I can handle it a lot better than I can in my home. So does that make me just a bad person? I don't
Yeah.
know. Or I like have more
I
capacity during the day or what? I don't know.
no, I mean, I think you get into just the challenges of parenting,
Yeah.
because and that'll be its own episode. But it is different when you are a mentor, teacher, coach to a child
Yeah.
than when you are their actual parent, just off of the dynamic the child has towards you.
Mhm.
So, I mean, but one of just going back to your other thing, I think if you communicate, hey, I mean, I'm sure you've potentially communicated that the pacing
Yeah.
stresses you out to
Yeah.
him.
Mhm.
Okay. So if you've communicated that, then you can also communicate, hey, that stresses me out, but I want you to be able to do that. I'm
Right.
going to close my eyes and try to see if that works for me so we
Yeah.
can see if that. And I think that allowing that freedom for him and seeing if that works for you, I think would
Right.
be the beginning to starting to bridge
Yeah. Yeah.
uh, to a point where you can both have those conversations.
Yeah. Interesting. Interesting.
But
Interesting.
that's where a lot of it, like, and going back to the pacing, a lot of my pacing would often happen in work settings
hmm
because I was often used in work settings to problem solve.
Right.
Can't
Right.
problem solve if I can't pace.
Huh.
So
Yeah.
a lot of the very things, and this is what I'm trying to learn, a lot of the very things society judges me for is also comes from the same space that it also celebrates me for.
Yeah.
So like
I know.
you mentioned,
keep going, and then I'll
No,
come back
I was
to
just gonna
my.
say because you mentioned about even like my concern for people. That empathy is directly connected to my years with depression. That
Yeah.
understanding that like if other people feel as bad as I felt, that tears me apart, and I can't allow
Mm,
that to exist.
mhm,
So like that
mhm.
direction, me always thinking of others and all that connects to my anxiety and my ADHD.
Yeah.
My problem solving, ADHD. Like I just spend more time on problems than most people do because at any given time I have 100 different problems in my head trying to work
Yeah.
themselves out.
And I think that's so often our stories of like what is maybe like our greatest strength can also be like our greatest weakness or like the enemy, kind of like this two-edged sword thing. But like for me, I feel like I can always see problems, right? Like I always see everything that's wrong, everything that's out of order, but that helps me like create order. It helps me like want to be organized. It helps me like with my students to try to like help build them up. It helps me understand like areas where I need to grow. I mean, even, maybe I'm my own worst critic, maybe not. I don't know. Maybe I need to be harder on myself, but I feel like that's then also like one of my greatest strengths is like because I can see those things that aren't working well. I can come up with solutions. I can come up with ideas. I see that ways can be, things that could be improved and stuff. But it is like this catch 22. I mean, one of the problems in my last relationship was his need for like the affirmation or that. And I'm like, hey, if I'm not telling you it's wrong, it's not wrong. That doesn't go over so well though.
Yeah.
So trying to figure out like how do I like celebrate the things that are there, not get so consumed by the things that are lacking, and like what role do I really need to play in making it different.
Yeah. A lot for me has been just learning how different people are. And I mean, a big
Mm-hmm.
thing now in that is accepting for myself that a lot of things that can work for others or do work for others often don't work for me.
Yeah.
Um, and having that understanding. But with that, learning to communicate those needs. And just even on
Yeah.
that, I'm just like my legs shaking. Me being able to communicate to someone, no, I'm actually calm with my leg shaking. Like if you're the one getting nervous,
Yeah.
and that's a different conversation than you
Right.
asking me to stop shaking my leg. But in me being able to communicate that to them, then they're now able to figure out what they actually need. And is
Mm-hmm.
their
Mm-hmm.
need really to control my body? Like my leg
Right.
shaking? Is that like, because,
Good
but it
point.
does.
Good point.
I mean, but that's where it
Yeah.
that is kind of a
Yeah.
reflective question. What is the end goal of that? Do you really
Yeah.
want that, or are you trying to control a bigger picture?
Yeah. Yeah. Because, like, why does being shaken? I mean, yeah, because for me, like, I don't like being shaken because it makes me feel a little seasick. So, like, if I'm sitting by somebody who is a shaker, like, watching it doesn't bother me. It's if I'm moving because of it. Like, if I'm in a
Yeah,
movie theater, like a seat or something, and I'm like, I'm going to get
yeah.
seasick.
Well, what I get a lot
But
is like because we're in California, earthquakes.
yeah,
I
this
freak
is an
people out because
earthquake.
they think it's an earthquake. Yeah.
Yeah. Can we tell a funny earthquake story really quick?
What is it?
So yeah, right. So it was like it was in between our either first and second and third years of summer school. And, because like people like that, us that just are natural leaders, I was running summer school and I was like 25. Do you remember
After
this?
almost quitting the first year, I will mention again. Remember
The
that?
first year? You mean the
Well, the first
first
semester.
3 months? Yes. Yeah. Anyways, and here I am 19 years later, still in the same profession. Um, anyways, and I was like observing the classroom and giving feedback to the teachers that were in there. And sure enough, if a dang earthquake, and mind you, we were like the hub so there's people from all over the country, like most of which had
Mm,
never experienced an earthquake before.
yeah.
So this earthquake comes, I like start feeling seasick, right? I'm like, okay, everybody line up. We move out to um, the yard or whatever they called it at the time. This kid was like, I
Yeah.
can't die. I haven't been baptized. You remember
I remember
that?
hearing it now. Yes.
So then this gets better because I am like dying laughing. I'm like, how at 12 is that like your first thought? But I'm like laughing and telling another teacher that was out there, and she's like, oh, my like beginning years of teaching. And she was in the building that had the 2 stories. They were up on the second story, and this kid ran out of the room. And this was during the time where you still got under the desks, so she had been teaching
Mm.
longer than us. And now we escape a building because you don't want to just find dead students under desks. Like, get out of cement buildings. But at the time, remember,
Okay.
you would hide. Growing up, even in California, we would hide, like, you would hide under a desk. So
I thought
anyways,
we were
that's what
still
this.
supposed to do that. So thank you for
You
informing
what?
me. I thought we were still
What?
supposed to do that. So thank you.
No, you get out. I don't know. Follow your local protocols, okay? don't,
Yeah.
don't hold us liable for
Yeah,
any of
we're
this.
not advising emergency procedures here.
Yeah,
There's no. Yeah,
not part of FEMA, no
we are not
affiliation to.
responsible for any
But anyways,
emergency assistance in this podcast.
this teacher said this kid, also 12, seventh grader, maybe 13, was like, I can't die. I'm still a virgin. And I'm like, oh my gosh. So she like had to go find him in the hallway and was like, I'm really sorry that you said that out loud, but like, we need to get back to our novel. I was like, oh my gosh, the things that like cross your head when you think you might be dying.
So, yeah, I mean, I think with the earthquake and the experiences of what people can kind of share while they're in fear of potential earthquakes, it does make sense as for me to, kind of share to them that my leg is shaking. But that has been really the big thing of me being able to now communicate that.
Hmm.
Um, has been a huge relief, but it's still interesting because I still know there is that a social stigma, and
Yeah.
it's definitely lessened. I mean, it's something at least discussed now, where I feel like when I was younger, things like that were, never actually discussed. But
Yeah.
still kind of holding a stigma because even in me, and I'll speak in my own experience, even though I communicate publicly that, I struggle with anxiety and ADHD and, depression and all those things, I'm still expected to function
Hmm.
like someone who is neurotypical in the workplace.
Yeah.
Like my anxiety is somehow supposedly not supposed to impact me in the workspace,
Right.
even though
Right.
that's part of my whole identity. And it's just interesting because of how we have that stigma, and we have an increased awareness or respect about it, but there still isn't that space really for a lot of adults to really
Yeah.
be able to actually deal with their differences and be quote unquote successful in whatever space
Yeah.
they're put in.
How do we solve this problem? Acosta, back to our like, we have no solutions, only our stories and our struggles, but like, I want solutions. I want what I want, and I want it now.
Now, and I think it seems to be that is what that just seems to be human nature. I mean,
Hmm.
in all honesty, what I'm also like experiences and kind of how we've discussed with even our healing, it would be nice to have just solid solutions. And
Right. And how much of this is like cultural too, right? Because I think about, even talking about this made me think of, I had a friend that taught over in Japan for a while, and their whole like country's motto is kind of like always keeping other people comfortable. Like,
oh
so
yeah, yeah,
there's this constant concern or consideration or obsession, I don't know, with like, I mean, nobody would even dare answer a cell phone in a public space, like, because it's disrespectful to others.
hmm
Or like on an escalator, like, I forget the story she was telling me either. Like, nobody would not stand just on the right hand side, like, we're, and that's how we're supposed to function. But like, how many people really, take that? But in Japan, there's like no question about it. Like, you are always considering how to make other people's lives like better. And but then you also look at like their mental health and suicide rates, and I don't know.
yeah.
I don't know why it
Uh,
like made me think of that.
Ours are pretty bad too. So I mean,
Yeah.
and I think we're on
Yeah.
the other extreme of where we can somewhat be obsessed with the individualistic lifestyle.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
with that kind of my mind, as we go back to kind of always thinking, I'm always thinking how my presence is impacting others.
Me
So the
too.
example that you gave me as far as like everyone, being on one side as far as the escalator, because
Yep.
so I'm assuming so people who are moving quicker can move
Yep.
past, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yep.
My biggest pet peeve is people who drive slowly on the left-hand lane on freeways.
Yes.
And it's something I'm
Yes.
still working on. I've discussed it in therapy. I have so
Yeah.
many strategies for
No,
this,
but
but it
it
is
just feels like a
still,
blatant disregard for like how things are
yes.
supposed to function and could function efficiently if people would just do what they're supposed to do.
Yeah. And that's where we go back into kind of our
Mhm.
culture where it's very intimate. Like, who are you
Yeah.
to tell me how to drive? I'm driving the speed limit and things like that.
Right.
But it's just like that's not how
Yeah.
we've socially
Actually,
agreed to
one
how this
time
freeway
I
thing
heard,
works.
yeah, right. I heard
Like
one
we've
police
agreed
officer.
that the faster cars are on the left, slower cars are on the right. That's the generally
Yes.
accepted
Yeah.
understanding when we
And I
go on
mean,
these things.
it's actually, I think it's a law. But, anyways, in different
It is in some
places.
places. It is definitely in
Yeah.
some places, which is I wish it
I,
was everywhere and in California.
and enforced. Like, is
Yeah,
that what we could
enforced.
be putting our money towards?
Yeah.
Get those little. Uh, yeah. Fair enough. Fair enough. Yeah.
That's where we need the AI and car chips for. If you are trying to
Okay.
move over too fast and you're too slow, the chip just keeps moving you over. Nope. Nope.
Yeah.
Either you
Or it
press
like
the
yells
gas
at
or I'm kicking
you.
you to the right.
I like it. I am
That's
here
where
for
we need.
that.
We don't
Hmm.
we don't need to fund any law enforcement. We can keep it all
Yeah.
in
No,
AI.
just use AI for good. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you don't get like angry people.
Like me.
You like
Yes.
right? You eliminate some road rage. I mean, it's a win-win.
Yeah. That definitely is one of my biggest pet peeves. But that's where it
I
just
think so.
also I realize driving is asking me to do some of my most challenging tasks. So it's asking me to sit down and it's asking me to focus on one thing.
I think of that with my son a lot too. And you know, it was interesting when we paid for like the super expensive course, like driving course, because he was so scared about driving because of, yeah, like all the things to consider all the time. Um, he would have a different view of his experience of learning to drive with me, but I felt I actually enjoyed it because as he was driving, I could verbally process what was happening, right? You know, I'm like, hey, so we're approaching a red light. You know, like you will be able to turn right, but you want to make sure, like, look at the other areas, make sure everyone has stopped. So I still felt a little bit in control because I was just like doing this constant narrative.
Hmm.
But with his ADHD, he's got like this funny mix of he's also super fearful of getting hurt, which I think has probably served him well with his impulsivity, like because there's this constant like awareness of like getting hurt, so it stopped him from doing some things that maybe his brain would want to do. Um, but it's been overwhelming for him, like to have
Hmm.
to. And oh, that was what I was saying. So when I learned to drive, it was like, you know, like this and like in quiet, like, but now they are encouraging not loud, but soft music in the background to just have like something else for your mind
Hmm.
to, I don't know. They said it's like helping them pay attention more. I don't know how that works, but he does better when there's at least something in the background. And really, I think this came up in a different episode too. Even though I spent my whole 20s like going to concerts and music and coffee houses and all these things, the last really decade plus of my life, I've just had really limited capacity with the amount of responsibility that probably has been a lot that I put on myself, but also a lot of other dynamics at play. But I spent so many years just like craving silence because my whole life felt
Hmm.
so loud um, that I couldn't. I was like one of those people that's like, hold on, I can't read the sign, turn the music down so I can see better.
Yeah.
How does that even relate? I don't know. But now getting back to the place that like music is re-entering my life, like hope is re-entering my life, kind of like capacity in general. Um, anyways, this is me rambling again. This is what I do, guys.
No.
But listen to calm music, helps you pay attention. And there's a lot to
Uh,
think of when you're driving.
yeah. And
And move over.
so one of the things that I thought was really interesting, because you were saying how the fear of um, being injured has kind of kept your son in some check with his impulses.
Mhm.
Very similar for me in fighting. So my anxiety
Okay.
kept me from fighting as a kid in my impulses, which was interesting because when I started medicating my anxiety and my anxiety cut down, all I wanted to do was fight people, which was
So, but growing up,
fascinating.
what was the pause on fighting? Like that you didn't want to
The
hurt or you didn't
anxiety,
want to,
uh,
like,
it just anxiety. I don't. So a lot of it was, as I've mentioned, I had rage. I honestly didn't think I'd be able to stop. If
oh,
I
okay.
if I honestly
Okay.
thought if someone pushed me to fight, I didn't know because my body would go physically numb. I would
Yeah,
become
yeah.
so emotionally overstimulated that my
Okay.
physical body would go numb and I wouldn't feel anything. Because then I'm
Right.
so because when I was younger I would punch doors and I have holes in a couple doors, but I wouldn't ever feel that punch because I was just so emotionally overloaded that my
Right.
body would physically go numb. So I was
Mhm.
always worried that I would not be able to stop.
Okay.
Um,
Right.
so that
But then
anxiety
as
would keep
you treated your anxiety,
my impulses were turned up, and it was just all I wanted to do. It's like it was so much harder, but it was like I'm glad because I was an adult at that point where I could, okay,
so your
these
brain was a
aren't
little bit more developed.
right, these aren't sensations that you should be, giving into. But I wonder if I were a kid and I didn't have
Mhm.
anxiety as bad as I did, how many more
Yeah.
fights or different because often too even with causing any kind of trouble I always knew all the consequences I'd always think out
Huh.
everything through, so it's
Yeah.
just like I would only do things that I knew I would get away with. So how many things would I have done if I knew if I thought there was a
Yeah.
chance I wouldn't be able to get away with them
Yeah.
and I didn't have that anxiety like keeping, so it is interesting how all those play together. um
Yeah. And some for protection and some maybe don't serve us as well. And as we become
yeah.
adults, we can figure out what is serving
And
us well.
the big thing that I feel I've learned is that, and this is actually more so the case, is the body is designed to survive. It's not
Yeah.
meant to do anything. It's not designed to do anything other than that well. It's designed
Yeah.
to survive. All the
Hmm.
extra stuff of enjoying life, being
I was like,
happy,
where do we get to the
yeah,
thriving place?
that's on us. That's where I feel
Yeah.
like that really has to be on us. Our body is here to protect, and that's where I kind of go into just where I removed a lot of judgment around myself and my neurodivergence
Mhm.
because I can't really be mad at what I've done in the past if it allowed me to get to this point, which I am content with.
Yeah. Well, that's
So,
beautiful for me to hear and a good reminder for now.
yeah. And I mean, that's why there's still a lot of growing. But what's good is now that I feel kids do have an opportunity to be different. And there is
Hmm.
now a lot of space for different careers, different types of
Yeah.
jobs.
At least way more than, right?
Hmm.
Still, obviously, always room for growth and change and understanding and all the things.
Right. So,
All
quite
right.
an experience, quite a journey. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Fun
neither
to
of us
be
have the answers.
alongside for parts of it.
Yeah, we've been here for a good amount of time. Yeah, so thank you for everyone who has joined us. Again, if you
Yes.
have any comments, learning likes really help spread the word with the algorithm with podcasts. So likes, comments, subscribe, all those fun things that we are learning in this journey. As was mentioned, it was quite interesting for me launching the podcast. I didn't sleep that night, but starting to have fun with it again.
Yeah.
Um, really just something new.
Yeah.
So thank you
It's
all.
been fun.
Yeah, thank you all who are in this journey with us. And we hope to see you all with us in a couple weeks. We're hoping to release these every other week. So we have,
Yay.
we filmed this, we have another one ready to edit and come out. So you can always know you can count on us for more.
Yep. Tell us you want more and what you want, and we'll be
Yeah.
here.
So wishing you all peace, love, and power, and hope to see you again.
Bye, guys.